Don't draw mouths like this. I'll show you the most common mistakes people make when drawing mouths and what you can do instead to draw natural, realistic mouths, lips, and teeth. So the very, very first thing you want to know about drawing mouths are not flat. So basically, if you think about the skull and you think about our teeth, right? Our teeth are actually on a cylinder like this. So if a face is like facing directly towards you and your line of vision, like your POV is right here, okay, which means like your eye is right on the line of the mouth, only then will this line, the opening of the mouth, appear flat. 99% of the time, there's usually a slight curve to the mouth. Okay, so if you put a curve, just like a slight curve, whether it's curving down or curving up, it really depends on whether the face is tilting up or tilting down. If you're just drawing a head like this and you can kind of see like the line of the eyes are tilting slightly this way, then you know the mouth would also be tilting up. So you really want to figure out the angle of the head first, and then you want to make sure that you have a little bit of a tilt in your mouth, just to show the cylindrical form. Okay, so the other thing you want to keep in mind when you're drawing a mouth to not make it look flat is you don't want to outline the entire mouth. Usually speaking, like if you look at some of these examples on the side here, you'll see that the outline sort of stops, right? It stops along the edges of the mouth. So where a lot of people go wrong is they'll draw a mouth and then they sort of outline the bottom lip like that, which makes it look really flat. So a trick I have for you is just like not drawing the bottom lip completely, but just adding a little bit of a line, right? Just kind of like a broken line, especially at the sides of the bottom lip. If you leave those open, it tends to look a lot more natural. If you look at a mouth from the side, let's just say here we have here's a profile of a head. Right? When I draw a head from the side, I'll usually figure out like where the nose is. So for example, let's say the nose is here, right? Usually the nose will sort of align with the ear. There's like a fleshy part that protrudes from this baseline here. It sticks out a little bit more, and then the chin kind of comes out this way. If you feel where your teeth are, right? Your teeth are actually probably about here. Okay, and then your lip sticks out a little bit more. So that little flat disc here, this is like the little extra part that sticks out, the little extra pouty part, right? And then the mouth kind of opens up. Let's say you draw a mouth like this, and then the nose is kind of coming out like this. Then what the lips are doing is they kind of connect from the bottom of the nose, and then it kind of comes out this way. The top lip is usually in shadow, and then the bottom lip, which is usually thicker than the top lip, but maybe not by that much, right, will also be in shadow. So structurally, right, your lips are kind of like two cylinders that are kind of stacked on top of each other. So if you have a light source, say your light source is coming from above, which it usually is, most of the top lip is going to be in shadow and most of the bottom lip is going to be in the light. So that's why when you look at mouths, you'll see that most mouths, the upper lip is darker than the bottom lip. Okay, so if you squint with me here, you'll actually really see those cylinders happening here, right? You can see the cylindrical form. If you think about the lip as these cylindrical or worm-like forms, you'll understand how to shade them better. Let's talk about how to draw mouths on heads in different directions. A big mistake that I see people do is when they're drawing a head that's kind of tilting up, they'll draw like the eyes, let's say they draw the eyes, then they draw the nose and the nostrils, and then they'll draw the mouth like this. They'll be like, oh, this person's smiling. Of course, their mouth is gonna tilt upwards, because when we think if somebody's smiling, we think immediately that the mouth is gonna go this way. Or if they're sad, right, then the mouth goes downwards. Actually, when a mouth is smiling on a head that's tilting up, the smiling mouth is going to tilt down. So the smiling mouth, right, it doesn't matter what the mouth is doing. It has to follow the direction of the head, right? If I tilt the corners of the mouth up a little bit, then it actually makes the person look like they're smiling, right? That they're not sad. But it's never going to look like this with this type of head orientation. Same thing with a head that's looking down. The mouth angle doesn't matter if this person is angry. It doesn't matter. Their mouth is still going to curve up, right? So let's say this person is really sad. Like, that's what makes a mouth look flat. It's never going to look like that. I mean, if you're doing a stylized illustration, like let's say you're drawing like an anime character and you want to get super silly with it, sure, no problem. Like, you can draw a mouth like that. It doesn't matter. You can look flat. That's a style choice. But if you want to follow the principles of anatomy and structure and all that, the mouth will still need to curve up, but you can curve the corners of the mouth down, but this line still has to follow the direction of the form. So that's like the most common mistake that I see people make, is not following the actual structure of the head, but instead just kind of following the happy, sad curve, if you know what I mean. So very quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about teeth. So we basically have around 32 teeth. We have 4 incisors, and those are basically our 4 front teeth. And so our 4 front teeth are kind of shaped like this, right? And you'll notice that because our teeth resemble a cylinder, even though the molars are a lot wider than the incisors, basically as it moves backwards, right, the teeth are going to appear to be smaller. The biggest mistake I see people make when they draw teeth is that they will draw every single tooth. Okay, so they might draw a mouth like this, and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna draw the teeth, and then they kind of do this. It starts to look very cartoony, and kind of it sort of attracts attention to itself. Yeah, it looks a little bit scary. So you might do this if you're intentionally, trying to draw a character that's a little bit creepy. But if you take a look at these teeth, right? Like if you take a look at that tooth, like you can start to see like the teeth are best represented with just a white shape, right? So the best way to draw teeth is to not draw teeth. So suggested teeth, in my opinion, is always a better design choice than drawing all of the lines in between. I generally will just kind of put in a little bit of the gums and then a little bit of the gap. So even like this mouth is very simple. It's just made up of shapes, right? It already feels a lot more natural and a lot less scary than that mouth. So yes, suggested teeth is always better. So if you're drawing mouths and you're kind of thinking about how do I, simplify, or how do I draw in the values without getting lost in all the details, make sure the top lip is a little bit darker, right? And then I might choose a slightly lighter value, and I might put in like a little bit of the lower lip. And you'll see that some of the teeth are also in shadow, right? Because that upper lip is going to cast a little bit of a shadow. But basically you can keep mouths pretty simple by just thinking about how you would shade simple forms. Basically, what I do is I start by drawing the opening, right? So like that opening line. So it would be the mid line. So if the mouth is not open, let's say the mouth is closed, like let's take this mouth, for example. Okay. If I was to draw this mouth, a lot of people might draw this mouth like this. Like they'll start by drawing this squiggly line, and then they add more squiggly lines, and then like more squiggly lines. How I would start is I would start with the midline as a straight line, and then I alter that midline, right? So it's a lot easier for me to draw the midline and then sort of alter it, but it still keeps the integrity of the line, and it keeps the integrity of the direction, right? It's a lot easier for me to do that than it is for me to start by drawing a squiggly line. I also like to draw in like the top part using angles instead of curves. I see some people kind of draw curves like this, and even though there's nothing wrong with drawing curves, I find the angles are a bit more accurate. And also mouths from the top are generally more angular than the bottom. So like upper lips have more angles and bottom lips have more curves. You don't want to draw too many curvy lines because then it starts to lose its structure a little bit. All right, so let's move on to some celebs. I really love this expression here on George Clooney. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to like start to outline prematurely like this. It works better when I start with straight lines and then I alter them, because it keeps my focus on the direction of the tilt, right? Rather than focusing on exactly what the lips are doing, you want to get the direction of the tilt right. And then you can start to draw in the details, and usually I will use angles instead of curves. And then you can exaggerate it a little bit. I mean, should I draw in the wrinkle lines? Yes or no? And it depends on whether or not, they're important to the expression or important to the character. I'm not going to go into too much detail or too much shading here, because our main goal is to really just get the idea across for drawing mouths. So this is probably a harder example of a mouth. So if you're drawing a head that has a mouth that's closed, right, it's probably gonna end about there. But if his mouth is open, you would take the opening of the mouth. So you would take this distance here and you would add it to your drawing. Okay, so the face actually becomes longer. So just keep that in mind. The circle on his face would probably be about here. So if his mouth was closed, it would end, his jaw would end there. But because it's open, it's going to be a lot bigger, a lot wider. You just have to do a little bit of measuring and see sort of where the corners of the mouth align with the eyes. Usually it aligns in the middle. Like usually, like if this is your eye, the corner of the mouth would kind of align at the right of the pupil. So it sort of aligns like that too in this example, right? So if you look at the corner here and you go all the way up, it kind of aligns with the outside of the iris if the eye is looking straight. Okay, so it's not exactly halfway, it's like a little bit towards the outside. There's the bottom of the lip. There's a space between the bottom of the lip and like the top of the chin that sort of is usually in shadow, right? Here's the contour of the lip. This part goes down, this part comes out and across. There's no curve, like there's no almost like zero indentation on his upper lip because it's just so flexed that it's like completely round. You can actually draw in the form of the teeth like this, right? So you can see I put in some jagged edges here. I kind of put in some molars, like the transition of this tooth going in the opposite direction. It's kind of curving around, right? So the molars are here, they're just curved. And then the bottom teeth, although visible, they're a lot smaller, right? And then you got his tongue. And then you see the lip like really stretching and then eventually wrapping around. So his ear would be somewhere down here. What I do is I'll just kind of follow the line of my eyebrows and then the line of my nose, right? If I know which direction the head is turning in, I can just kind of estimate it's down there. Yeah, so to add a little bit of value to the mouth, you know, you would follow the same steps. You can kind of ask yourself, okay, how many values do I really want to, you know, to put in? Like there's a dark part in here, right? So that's like the darkest value. Just look for shapes and then your mid-tones. So your darkest value would be here. Okay, and then my second darkest value is going to be probably in here. So that's kind of like including the teeth, right? Including the bottom of the teeth. I would say that's probably value number 2. I'm just squinting at it. So you can see I start off pretty simple and then I start to add the details in later. You never want to outline too much because then it just starts to look too complicated and really not necessary, right? With all the details. So if you were doing anime, you don't have to add the gums. You don't have to put in all of the other details. You can see like you just want to focus on the direction of the head and the shapes and the values. All right, so just for fun, we're gonna draw Sofia Vergara because she's such a beautiful woman, even when she makes faces like this. Let's see how we would draw her mouth, because this mouth kind of goes against all of the rules. The first rule being she's smiling, kind of like she's being silly, even though her mouth is pointing down. So it goes against that. The second one is her bottom lip is outlined. So her bottom lip is thinner than the top lip, and this goes against the rules. The gaps in her teeth are more noticeable, right? Even though I say leave it out, sometimes it is more noticeable, right? So how do you draw a mouth that kind of goes against all of those rules? First of all, there are no hard rules when you're drawing anything. In this case, I would probably, again, start by drawing the curve, modify it a little bit, then I would draw in the top lip. And in this case, if I just kind of left her teeth white, I don't think it really is that descriptive. So you can see, like, once I put in those gaps, the black lines in between the teeth, suddenly it looks a lot more comical than before. We all know how to draw line art. We all know how to draw details. We all want to go a little bit crazy with our rendering. But really, the observation and the simplification are your best friends. Like, these two are probably what's going to make your drawing look a lot easier. If you've ever seen somebody's drawing, you're like, oh my goodness, how did they make it look so easy, right? They're focusing on the right things. So they're not drawing too many details too quickly. You know, they're not drawing too many squiggly lines in favor of detail rather than structure, right? So you always want to focus on structure first and then details last. Join a virtual art class in seconds and learn live from Wing Canvas instructors. Enjoy weekly assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork so you can create like a fearless illustrator. If you learned something new, please like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.